Seekers of the ancient wisdom, join with me to chant Gayatri Mahamantra with your back straight, with your hands on your laps, left beneath the right, contemplative mood, Gayatri Mahamantra. Om Bhurabhuvah Swaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Today we start from the chapter number 1, verse number 26. Our journey for the day shall not be able to further more than 4 verses. Chapter number 1 is known to be as the grief of Arjuna, the despondency of Arjuna. Whereas the actual mention of the word grief, it starts from verse number 27. And verse number 26 complements the verse number 27. Chapter number 1 has got 46 shlokas in total, 46 verses, whereas the name of the chapter, that is the grief or despondency of Arjuna, finds us mentioned for the first time in verse number 27. If you may recall it, I mentioned it last time that Arjuna, under the spell of his resolve to pursue his spiritual exercise, makes a requisition before the Keshav to take his chariot amidst both the forces, both the warring forces, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. He has a deep intention to sight and see properly who all are there to confront him. And here in the verse number 25, the chariot is placed amidst the battlefield where Arjuna can very conveniently sight all the warring army, the warring soldiers. Predominantly, he is brought there with an intention to sight Bhishma and Drona at the first instance. And if you may recall, Bhishma is the projection of one's me-ness, and Drona is an allegory utilized to mention the propensities of a human being. In verse number 26, the Arjuna now is able to sight all the near and dear ones whom he had cherished a considerable period of his life. He is able to cite his maternal uncles, his paternal uncles, his cousins, his brothers, his father-in-law, his master, his friends, almost all of them who were very dear and close to him. The emotional bonding now triggers a deep pain in the heart of the Arjuna that contributes to the arousal of the grief within him. When he is citing all the dear ones, he undergoes a great element of depression. And that depression is to damp the spirit of his spiritual pursuit, which had earlier charged the enemy camp to uproot it, since it had usurped his rightful claim to the throne. Now Arjuna, the moment he confronts all the dear ones, is now in a position where he loses all control on the balance of the seat of his understanding. Citing all the dear ones, Arjuna becomes bewildered. Now here, the question is, when we are talking and we are considering Bhagavad Gita from the parlance of this internal happenings within a seeker, it is a battle which is interiorized in a seeker, then how does the mention of the paternal, the maternal, the cousins, the father-in-law, the friends, etc. come in place? It is a valid question that the name of the relatives, what does it have to do with all the happenings that are now occurrences within a seeker? It's a rightful question. The great sages have remarked that all those, the dear ones who have been referred here as maternal, paternal, or other dear ones, are none else but various kinds of associations, feelings, emotions, habits, experiences that a seeker has been experiencing in his past life. All those associations now have developed a bonding within the seeker. The moment he initiates for a charge, all those associations, they arise for their own survival and are there to confront and combat his endeavor. Arjuna is now at the moment experiencing a great split in his own personality. We have had a great seer in the recent times in India by the name Maharishi Aurobindo. Maharishi Aurobindo is one of the greatest seers who was able to traverse into the dimensions of not only the consciousness but the higher consciousness. And he was able to invoke and also bring down the supermind, the super consciousness upon this planet. As it is said about him that he was a true scientist of the consciousness. He has mentioned a number of places about yogic psychology, and he has remarked that yoga is virtually to understand the process of uniting one's own existence, uniting one's existence with that cosmic consciousness. As he remarks that a human being, though considering he is one single entity, but there are so many sheaths and layerings within the same human being. As he mentions that a human being is a composition of not only concentric layers, but at the same time is also a vertical structure. As a listener, as a common listener, you should not get surprised at all these words, because here he is simply making a mention about the complexity of the human consciousness, which spreads into different members of one's existence. We all know that we have a brain, intellect, we all know we have a mind, we all know we have a chitta, through where arise different kind of imagination, and we also have an ego. All these attributes are none else but the members that enjoy the effulgence of the same one soul. But when it comes to the actual operation and function of the human existence, there is a split within the same human being who originally is a Purusha, but when he interacts with the Prakriti, that is the nature, he is now a composition of many selves. Any human being would experience different kind of personalities existing in the same self. At a given point of time, a human being is a sage, and yet at another point of time, he may act as demonic. We may recall many instances in our life where at a point for a similar situation, we behaved in the most noble manner, and at the same time, on a similar situation at another occasion, we acted in an ignoble manner. The human being is the same. It is you or me. But we have different compositions, different ingredients within our own same self. If you ask me, as Aurobindo has rightly remarked, that a human being is an amalgam of various kind of entities, which on a surfacial level is not easy to comprehend or understand. Thickly speaking, you appear to be one that appears before the mirror, the one that you sight while you get up for your morning. But if you try and probe your own self, if your power of discrimination becomes more fine and you dive down within your own existence, then you unravel yourself and the startling fact comes before you that what appears to be one actually is not one. There are so many layerings acting within you. You are a complex entity. And for a yogic seeker, when he embarks upon this spiritual pursuit, he is able to sight all those disintegrated members that are rotting within his own individuality. To any ordinary human being, this complex and the rivaling part, the rotting factor, may not be visible easily. But it is visible to those who start on their spiritual pursuit, because when you are under the spiritual pursuit, your internal magnifying glass enlightens the space within. When you are inward, interiorized, you are able to sight what all is there within you. Then you sight that I have different minds. I have different propensities that drive me all through. And yet, I have the strongest ego that at times would charge me. Any human being has got these two warring factions, the good and the bad. Whether it is the good intellect or a bad intellect. Whether it's a good mind or a bad mind. Whether it's a good imagination or a bad imagination. Whether it's a good ego or a bad ego. The divine and the demonic both exist at all members within a human existence. And they all become visible, they become apparent once the seeker dives within. Once you trigger your spiritual exercise, gradually you discover too much in existence within your same self. Truly speaking, when you embark upon your spiritual journey, all those factions from whom now you shall be able to gather ground become warring factions, and they wage a war against your endeavors. And then your initial efforts are thwarted. Likewise now, through Arjuna, the allegory comes in place where he initially charged his propensities and was there to dare them. And with his noble intention, he makes a requisition to Keshava, let me see who all are there to fight against me. And Keshav knows it well, that the moment Arjuna would confront his propensities, his hardened habits, there are chances for him to lose ground, because the inimical forces are going to cast a spell of venom on this seeker. Therefore, in verse number 23, 4 and 5, he is ascribed with the name Gudakesh, ever vigilant. Parth, one who has renounced in entirety. All these names were a kind of a premonition to Arjuna that now you are going to be eyeball to eyeball with your warring factions. And those warring factions are potent enough to recall you of your association. They'll make you blind. Your logic will go into drain. Your emotional upsurge will become blindfolded, and you shall become a foolish sympathizer of all those propensities against whom you have declared to wage a war. And this is the folly of any seeker when he would charge within himself on the aspects of true introspection. Once we start analyzing our own self, our propensities through one logic or the other, they confront us, allure us for one reason or the other, and sway. And they thwart our endeavor, which wants to go beyond the limited scope of a limited human being. In verse number 26, all the relatives are the integral part of the same human existence which has been experiencing all meanness, all dwarfed kind of characterization within the same individuality. Here, the script writer has wonderfully given them the name of different relatives. The word relative means those who are associated with us, those who have a genetic bonding with us, those whom we cannot easily dispel from or disassociate from. They are the relatives. And all those relatives have to be here viewed from the aspect of the propensities, habits, emotions, feelings, etc. within our own self. All those senses, all those tendencies, all those impulses that have been driving our character so far are the relatives which have been here named by the script writer as maternal, paternal uncles, cousins, brothers and friends. Very recently, I've had an opportunity to watch a Hindi film. I don't know how many of you would understand that Hindi film, but let me make a mention because it's something which here reinforces my version. There has been a Hindi movie. The name has been a very unique one. It seems to be very kind of a ridiculous name, but it carries a deep sense behind it. So do not ridicule it by the name, especially to those who understand Hindi. The name of the movie is Matru Ki Bijli Ka Mandola. Matru is the core character, Bijli is the heroine of the film, and Mandola is the name of the village. The deep ethos behind the film is about the kind of atrocities which people who connive together in the society to further and cherish their ulterior motives, they come and they really confiscate the rights of the weaker section. Here, there is the core character, the one who acts as a kind of a feudal lord of the area, a rich, affluent person. He undergoes a split personality, and the split is a very rigid kind of a split. That same character, when he's under the spell of intoxication, he acts as a divinely soul. But when he is not in the effect of intoxication, he acts as the most cruel and unworthy human being. Now here, the same human being is demonstrating a conduct which is poles apart, something which is contradictory to his own existence. In the night, when he is under the spell of the booze, he is a very divinely and a sane person, acting into the interest of the weaker sections. He there even charges the weaker section to riot against him. But the moment he is out of the intoxicated state, he becomes the same wretched personality, and there to usurp the right of the weaker section. The film is about the kind of a split in the personality of a human being. The human being is the same individual, but within the same individual exist different kind of individualities. Such individualities which at times side with the Kauravas, and at this time they side with the Pandavas. The film is a projection of verse number 26 in its own manner. Those of you who are versed with Hindi, the subtitles in the English could very well cite it and associate to the verse number 26. Verse number 26 has to be viewed as all those internal impulses, tendencies, emotions, feelings and propensities that have been named as different relatives associated with the Arjuna. In verse number 27, the mention goes that now Arjuna, after citing the dear ones whom he has to now combat, is losing the charge, that esteem, that resolve with which he had initially charged to fight. Now he is in a state where he is losing his confidence. His emotional brain is overpowering the logic. My great seer had once remarked a wonderful statement. He said that logic alone could act most cruel, and at the same time emotion alone could be blindfolded. Unless the logic and the emotion they wed with each other, wisdom shall never come into place. What is wisdom? Where logic and emotion act hand to hand with its most appropriateness. The most appropriate aspect of the logic and emotion going hand to hand is termed as wisdom. Here Arjuna is lopsided towards emotion, which is leading him to a blindfoldedness. In emotion, which is simply recalling the association with those relatives. An emotion which recalls to him the bonding factor. He is now putting to side the logic, the purpose of his fight. Why did he wage a war? Because those of his relative has usurped his rightful claim to the throne. Now he is forgetting it. Instead of that, he is under the spell of an inertia where emotional upsurge has created a split into the same Arjuna. Here, he is not considering the appropriate logic. And when this happens to any human being towards any resolve in his life, the outcome shall not be harmonious. The outcome shall be rioting one. The outcome shall be the most unworthy one. This particular verse number 27, where the actual mention of the delusion of Arjuna, the despondency, the grief of Arjuna finds its mention. Now, since he is under the spell, under the effect of an emotional upsurge, he becomes deluded. His despondency, his grief here triggers. Now, in the further verses, the mention goes, the effects of such delusion and despondency upon one's own seat of understanding. If for any reason one would experience such a delusion or such a grief or despondency, the faculties of the brain cease to act in their rightful manner. Your intellect shall not be able to serve you properly. Your mind shall not be able to serve you properly. Your imagination shall not serve you properly. And your ego shall lose its ground. You will be scintillating in a feeble state of mind. One would think else and do else. And Arjuna right now is in the same state. And the script writer has excellently mentioned the kind of psychological and physiological happenings into the Arjuna. As the script writer mentioned, that he is now trembling. He is in a state of horripilation. He is in a state where he is experiencing the burning of the skin. He has got a parched throat. All these psychological occurrences transpire in a human being when one's seat of awareness or seat of understanding undergoes a deep effect of some great shock. And here the shock to Arjuna is, would I, could I, or should I be able to fight all those whom I have revered so far, whom I have had a long association, with whom I have cherished many happy moments? Now am I going to fight and kill them? Just simply a consideration of such a thought has led to such devastating psychological and physiological occurrences into the same Arjuna. And these have been very rightfully mentioned here as the burning of the skin, standing of the hair ends, horripilation or trembling, etc., etc. Verse number 28, 29 and 30 express the kind of feelings and emotions that are moving, that are basically a turbulence which has been created within the Arjuna, and its mention in the dimension of the physical and mental occurrences has been projected in verse number 28, 29 and 30. The seekers must understand that all these occurrences and happenings basically do not transpire in a seeker in the same manner, since it is a poetic expression, and here Arjuna is a character, is an individual upon whom this entire allegory has been based. So here the poetic expression has taken the liberty to enhance the levels of the turbulation going into the mind of the Arjuna. Whereas in actual real life, when we experience such a state within, where the divine within us, while citing the demon within us, the impulsive act of our own conduct, which has been chartering us since times unknown, the propensities within us, nothing of this kind shall happen. We shall be silently swayed by them. What happens when our resolve dissipate? They dissipate silently and quietly. We are not able to even analyze and understand that what we had resolved has now fallen like a pack of play cards. Within a true life, it does not happen in the same manner. But if as a seeker, you introspect and probe yourself to the finest scale, you would understand that all such occurrences really transpire below the superficial understanding of a human being. It happens in the same way, though we may not be able to understand what exactly happened. What happens in your computer's motherboard, hard disk or other parts, you are not aware. You simply are aware what transpires at the application end and appears before you on the terminal. What exactly happens at the end of the machine, you don't know. Likewise, within the depths of our own awareness, how do these activities transpire? What form? We do not know. But when the seeker goes deep within himself, would find a different world. There are cameras available today which are able to picture, which are able to shoot and record certain mini scaled, I should say the nanoscaled occurrences in the same nature, whether it is your skin or a droplet of a water or a splash of a water, whatever. A different world is visible. It's altogether a different opening of a new dimension. Something which probably we cannot imagine is always occurring before us, right within us. And the same thing happens to a seeker when he for the first time probes himself, goes into the different layerings of his existence in order to clean, in order to unite himself as one under the yogic wisdom, shall find these warring factions creating a riot and able to throw a spell of a blanket of emotion, leading any Arjuna within into state of delusion, despondency or grief. Grief is the total dissatisfaction about the resolve. Grief is about losing one's own resolve to the allurement of one's own deep propensities. I end my deliberation over here, and the next time we'll continue from verse number 31. To all those seekers who are benefiting out of these discourses, I make a requisition to contact and communicate merely for the purpose that we are able to understand that there is an association of the knowledge of ancient wisdom which is flowing down to you. The light of the Kesha in service to the humanity is able to do its rightful means and able to achieve the rightful ends. We'll meet you next time. Till then, Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti.